Okay, welcome back. We're on page 310 talking about creating an attractive layout and design. And they have some pretty cool rules here. They talk about using appropriate colors to highlight sections, but not using very bright colors. It'll really be kind of annoying. Use special effects kind of sparingly. People really don't like eye candy all that much, unless, of course, it's useful. Talk about hypertext, allow them to navigate to related topics or related parts of the screen. Group related things together. Don't have a student data with name and address, and over here is something else. Group them all together so they all kind of visually tie together. Keep screen displays uncluttered with enough white space to create an attractive readable form. And I would recommend white space has another reason, and that is to provide you enough room to perhaps sometime later go in and pop in some additional things to your form. So don't ever make a form full. Okay, display titles, messages, instructions in a consistent manner, perhaps at the same location on the screen. Use consistent terminology, so if you're going to call something a record in one place, don't call it a row someplace else. Ensure that the commands always have the same effect. We kind of mentioned that before about, if the clear command doesn't mean two different things depending on what screen you're on. Okay. Ensure that similar mouse actions produce the same results. Right click over here is going to be similar to right click someplace else. To confirm the entry, you may have to have an enter key to enter something. And using users, you can use the red, amber, green kind of a thing to tell them if it's okay. And there will be some scenarios where you don't absolutely positively have an error, you just have a warning. It's like, are you sure? That would be a good one. And of course, use familiar kind of commands that other people have seen before, like cut and copy and paste. Don't invent new terms. Provide the Windows look and feel, provided, of course, you are talking about a Windows application that you're building. And, of course, avoid complex terms and technical jargon. Okay. Rule number 5. They talk about the switchboard, so to speak. Like a beginning screen that says, welcome to our application. Here are the 5 major functions that this application can perform. Just a very small splash screen that provides you the initial functions to jump right in and do whatever it is you do. So those are pretty cool. I find splash screens, it used to be a very common thing if you're writing an application using Microsoft Access, to have a switchboard which kind of directs the traffic, so to speak. That isn't used quite so much nowadays. Okay, but continuing. Use a command button to initiate actions. Like if you have a button that you want to do printing or requesting help. Don't use a hyperlink sometimes or a menu sometimes. Be consistent with however you do to force the program to actually do something. And if you're using a software package, make sure it allows you to have these customized menus and stuff. Add shortcuts, because some users are going to get really good at this and you can bypass 5 or 6 screens and go directly to whatever the heck it is they're wanting to do. And they talk about well, let me just go on to the next one. They talk about using radio buttons. Radio buttons are exclusive. Like if this was gender and it said male or female, you couldn't be both, and you couldn't be neither. You had to be one of the two. Check boxes. So this is a halfway decent design, where instead of, for example, the semester, instead of them typing fall, because you could misspell the word fall, they have a little pull down. So this is an example of preventing errors. If this was just a text box, you could type in spring, summer, or fall, and you could possibly misspell it. But if I pick it off the list, I can't possibly misspell it. Same thing with the academic year. I can't misspell the academic year. I can't accidentally. I'm preventing errors due to the design of my application. Okay. So use these kind of scenarios, toggle buttons, check boxes, command buttons. And for example, this find student thing isn't already in my screen. It's because it's a temporary thing that only needs to appear long enough to get things, and then after that it's kind of in the way. So they make it like a pop-up. So you hit this Find Student button, and then it pops up another little dialog box that says, please enter the Social Security number. You hit that, and then it goes back to this screen. So that's kind of a good design. So if you have check boxes, make sure you actually have the checks that are in there, of course. When dates are entered, use a date picker so they couldn't possibly screw things up. Okay, so these are all good examples of how to do enhancing the user interface. The next one is about, on page 313, it's talking about data forms, particularly, you're responsible for entering a whole bunch of data into a form of some sort. So, this is, whenever possible, use data entry methods from a form. In other words, don't normally, don't provide them a grid, for example, to fill things in like on that kind of looks like an Excel spreadsheet. Don't do that. Do it in a form format that's easy for them to see, is logical, in the correct order. So, for example, if they're familiar with doing the order number and they hit the tab key, it's going to pop over to the next one, the date and time, which probably is going to be filled in by the computer. Hit tab again, it'll go to the customer ID, get tab again to the customer name. So if that's the order that they want it to be in, build your form in the correct order. Okay. Position the insert, the focus, the wherever the mouse would be, automatically fill that in on the part of the form that you expect them to be entering into. So if this form first fires up, I'm guessing the cursor is going to be right there at order number. That's my guess. And, make sure they have a way of seeing exactly where that is. Generally, it's just a flashing little cursor bar. Okay. Provide a way to leave the data. Let's say I'm halfway through, and I go, geez, I got the wrong customer. I am completely, I fill this whole thing out, and now I just want to get the heck out. How do I get out? So there has to be some way of saying, I'm done, but I do not want to save the data. So we need some sort of a cancel order button in this particular form to provide them an escape clause, so to speak, to be able to get out. And of course, this one has a fairly descriptive for every field. Item number, the description, quantity, unit price, extended price. I can figure this thing out. I probably don't need any instructions whatsoever. I can just look at this form and figure out what's going on. What might be a little confusing is these little symbols over here. The little diamond and a little asterisk. Well, I've been around a long time, and I kind of know what that meant. An asterisk means add a new row. So in other words, this order only has one item in it, but it'll allow you to add another one. And this, I'm sure this will expand. This will continue growing. Like if they had 5 orders, it would just continue to get larger and larger and larger. Okay. So provide means for users to move around the fields in a standard way and in the order which makes sense to them. Not necessarily the order it is in the database, but in the order that makes sense to them. Provide them an opportunity to add, change, and delete records. Design the form to lay out much like whatever their source document is or used to be. Display the sample form, and like when it comes time for a date, be consistent. This is the U.S. way of doing dates, but you could have somebody from another country, and they might want to put the day before the month. So have some sort of a consistent way of doing this, and some sort of error checking to make sure that your foreign-born user isn't going to be entering dates incorrectly. Okay. And that's what's called an input mask, and it's designed to prevent errors. It's designed to prevent you from accidentally typing in the wrong date, as an example. Okay, continuing on. Require some sort of an ending keystroke for every field. Don't have it so that as soon as you type the one, it immediately pops over to the other. More than likely that they're going to type, 12001 enter. Or 12001 tab. Something that says, I'm done with that field, now please take me to the next field. That kind of makes sense. Okay. And don't make them type leading zeros for, don't make them type you know, 03. Don't make them type $signs for these things, because that's kind of dumb. But here, this probably got generated by the computer, right? I typed in probably this item number. It figured out this, so I didn't have to type. I entered 3. More than likely, it knew the unit price from that, and then it calculated that. So I didn't have to type a $sign. All I had to type was this field for item and the quantity. And that's it. It figured out everything else. And it formatted all this thing for me. And I don't have to type any leading zeros or $signs or decimal points, those kinds of things. Okay. And if you have a default value like the date and time, have it filled out by the computer. That kind of makes sense. And display a list of acceptable things, like, you know, a little pull down. You know, if you have an item ID, it ought to immediately, as soon as you type in an item ID, it ought to verify and say, yes, that's a valid item ID, those kinds of things. And then, of course, when you're done, particularly if you're going to be doing like a cancel order or a delete order, something you should come back and say, are you sure? It'd be horrible if I accidentally hit this exit order entry system and I was halfway through a form and it went boop, and I go, oh man. So have it some sort of saying, man, are you sure? You go, yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, on page 316 to talk about the validation rules, and this is kind of a technical discussion, and it's mostly for programmers, so I'm kind of going to go through it with a little broad brush. They talk about there's different types of checks that occur that you can use to validate entry before it gets submitted to like a database. One is a sequence check. Things have to happen in a particular order, and have they done that? The next one is an existence check. Something has to exist before you can proceed. Data type check, you know, is it a number, is it a string, those kind of things. A range check, where I'm putting someone's age in there and I actually typed in 300 for how old they are. Probably not correct. A reasonableness check, some sort of a check that says, man, are you sure? Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's an error. It's not going to prevent you from entering the order. But for example, this guy, let's say he ordered 3,000 of these nylon carrying bags red. It would be reasonable to come back and said, 3,000, are you sure? That would be kind of cool. And then of course a validity check to make sure that they all have the correct values. Combination check, because it could be that if you have this plus this, then you must have that, those kind of checks. And then that's about it. Those are those validation rules. Sometimes systems are designed to work in a batch mode, and so there could be additional batch check. So you run things through and it starts kicking things out to allow you to find the things that are wrong. Okay, that is pretty cool. Number 8, whew, the last one. On the bottom of page 318, they talk about the reducing input volume. So I don't want to have to type a bunch of stuff, and input volume isn't necessarily what we're talking about, like database volume. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how much stuff do I have to enter on a form, for example. So enter only things that are necessary. Never have them enter like something that doesn't change, like your company name. You know, maybe there's a field up there where you have to type your company name every single time, and your company name never changes. Well, that's dumb. Have that all filled in for you. So make sure, and if possible, use codes for things rather than have them type big, long numbers. Have some sort of a code that can shorten things up, as long as, of course, it still makes sense. And as long as, of course, they can remember these codes. They can type a code in lieu of typing an entire thing. Okay. That's probably a good place to stop at the 15-minute mark. We're going to switch horses and talk about form design here. Form design here in just a few.